we all doing on energy levels? Is everyone still, do I need to be energetic and energize you up, or how are you guys doing? Are we good? Yeah, we're good? All right, good, awesome, just checking. So, no, at that point, you guys have no energy, you'll leave the room. I'm not gonna sing. Maybe tonight after a couple, but no. So, my name is Brinke. I'm really happy to be back here today at FutureTech. Last year, I was here as well, and I spoke about Data API Builder. Was anyone at one of those sessions? Not even one hand? That's a shame. Okay, to convince you, I have lots of stickers from the Data API Builder session. They're really cute. If you want some, I have lots of extra stickers. After the session, come get some stickers. Okay. So this year, we're going to not talk about Data API Builder. This year, we're going to talk about something completely different. We're going to talk about, well, a really nice, happy thing. We're going to talk about, well, making a very boring process, well, a lot more fun. So who here kind of recognizes the issue when you're building a new system and then you need to, create data, right? You want to create a demo, a little presentation, so you have to have your persons, your users, your orders. So people here probably use like lorem ipsum, person 1, person 2, person 3. Who recognizes that? Who likes doing that? Oh, you hesitated. You hesitated. All right. Okay. You're singled out. So no one likes doing it, but everyone starts doing it. And those are the kind of things where I always like to look at and like, I want to fix that. That no one likes to do it, so why do we do it? And that's why we're going to talk about creating and taking Entity Framework Core data seeding to the next level, right? So Entity Framework Core for database connections, and then Bogus is able to generate data based on tons of data sets for you. And all of that, it makes it look very realistic. It's going to be really fun. You'll have to see it to believe it, but trust me, it's going to be really good. It saves you lots of time. My name is Brinke. I'm a senior software engineer and a knowledge officer at Arcadie. There I do a whole lot of things with, well, backend, app, cloud, DevOps, frontend, so a lot of .NET, Azure, C# kind of things, but I do a lot of things as well. At Arcadie, we do consultancy. So Arcadie is an agile software company in Zwolle, where more than 60 Arcadians guide organizations into higher care every day. We have a stand here. If you want, if you want more stickers, there's more stickers there, so visit us if you want to afterwards. But yeah, we do a lot of things with Microsoft technologies, front-end, UX and UI design. But that's not why you're here. You're here to learn about, well, Entity Framework Core, Bogus, and making boring things fun. So I have a little agenda, right? So we're going to learn about Bogus, we're going to talk about Entity Framework Core, we're going to use them together, and then we're doing a little demo, and then we're going to be finishing up conclusion, resources, questions, etc. I am going to be a little bit tight on time, but I always like doing a couple questions throughout the presentations, make this a little bit more interactive instead of me sending and you just guys receiving and then leaving. So feel free to interact or say, oh, I have an idea, oh, hey, that's fun, let's do this, let's make it a nice interactive thing today. So let's learn about Bogus. So Bogus is a simple fake data generator for .NET languages like C#, F#, Visual Basic .NET, etc. And the easiest way to show off what it is and what it can do is to just show it. So let's take a look at some code. We're going to create a user ID. We're going to set it to 1. We're creating a user faker, which is in the Bogus namespace a class with a generic type user. And now we can set all kinds of rules, right? So we can say the rule for the ID, so when a user is generated, we want to increment the user ID. That's not that special. But then the isActive needs to be a random Boolean. Date created needs to be a date in the past. First name needs to be from the name data set, a first name. Last name from the name data set, a last name. Email needs to be from the internet data set. Please create an email, but then with the first name and last name we already generated, so it makes sense. And then we generate 4 users. I think that's really cool. So we get Peter Smith, and then petersmith@yahoo.com, Rick Wessler, that's rick33@gmail.com, Lily Crawford, Lily_Crawford @hotmail.com, and then Melanie Grau at hotmail.com as well. Date created in the past, some different time zones, UTC, isActive, etc. Everyone, I think, in their head always has a couple of users that they create when they start an application, like, I don't know, like John Doe and that kind of stuff. But everyone always has like 4 or 5. And here we could just change this number to 100, 1,000, 1,000,000, and it would just really generate that many users. And this is only one data set. Before we continue, who actually here already knows Bogus? Who already uses it or has used it in the past? Yeah, a couple hands still raised. That's great. So why is Bogus useful? So it's really interesting because we can test with lifelike data, right? But it's also for compelling demos, well, like today. Like validating edge cases, because we can generate lots of different email addresses, so we can catch weird edge cases like in email addresses. We can test at scale. You want to test one user? Go ahead. You want to maybe create 1 million users? Go ahead. Change the number, and it will generate more lifelike data than you would come up with yourself. It's also really useful for unit tests, where sometimes you want unit tests that always run the same way, but it's also really interesting to think about creating tests that have different users or different orders or different bank accounts, and then your test suite is a little bit more flexible. Another perspective, privacy regulations. Who here grabs the production database and then runs it locally? That's okay, you raise your hand. 2 hands even. All right, everyone does it, I know, you're lying. So everyone does that because it's easy, because no one wants to set up this entire thing by themselves. No one wants to run a real production database and create it all themselves. So what you could do is you could maybe create a process where you grab the production database, you identify what is the personal data, and then we replace that with Bogus. So all the credit card numbers, let Bogus generate them. All the addresses, let Bogus do it. You don't, and that's just, again, a couple lines of code, put it in a little process, in a pipeline, and boom, this is fixed. Same thing for like masking as well. So you can just also, well, that's what I just said, let me put it differently. This might even prevent you from grabbing the production database and running it locally, because now you can create a process and set up that database in seconds instead of never, because you don't want to do this by hand. And it's also a lot more efficient, right? We're going to waste less time setting up data. Sounds good? Yeah? Awesome. So who is actually using this? So Microsoft has used it in their documentation, in their demos, in their tutorials. Elasticsearch uses it to test their .NET client. Fluent Validation uses it to benchmark. Bitwarden uses it for the server integration testing. And the Australian government uses this as well. They actually have their own data sets with all the people that are currently working in government or in parliament. So then they can, the government can create software with real people and lots of different, really cool things for zip codes for the people that live there, etc. More than 9,000 GitHub stars, more than 100 million downloads. By GitHub's numbers, it's used by 27,000 plus projects. So it's a project that has some credit. I showed you some users, but that's not convincing. So let's take a look at some more data sets as well. There's the lorem ipsum, right? Everyone's here familiar with lorem ipsum? So I see a lot of heads nodding. Thank you. It's also for me the end of the day. So names, right? First name, last name, job title, suffix, prefix. More data sets are available. The ones that are there have additional questions. Stefan, did you lose your phone? Yes. It's right here. Awesome. Addresses, zip codes, city, streets, latitude, longitudes, internet, avatar, email addresses, IP addresses, domain names, image URLs for lots of different sources. System information, file name, directory paths, Apple push tokens, dates in the past, in the future, between certain specifiers. Finance, really interesting, especially because this is highly personal. So this is where Bogus can really shine. Credit card numbers, Bitcoin addresses, IBANs, BICs, routing numbers, and commerce, which we're going to use mostly in the demo today, with products and categories and pricing. And there's so many more available. There's also ones that you can buy, focusing on healthcare, that the creator created. So there's community ones, there's paid ones, and also just more free ones in the library as well. So a little bit of history. Bogus is a .NET port of Faker.js. I think are people here familiar with Faker.js? Yeah, I see. So it's basically kind of the same API, and it was kind of created by Brian Chavez. He's also an MVP nowadays. The first release of Bogus was in 2015. We have so many releases. And I asked Brian, so why did you do this? And he said, well, it's very important for the .NET platform to have a reliable, well-maintained synthetic data generation story. Very fancy words, but they're very, very true, because no one likes to do these things, so let's have something that fixes this. Let's talk a little bit about architecture of a higher level. There's the Bogus project, there's the Bogus data extend project, and then there's Faker.js. So Faker.js is the source. So Bogus basically is based on that. And Bogus is quite smart, because what it does, it also uses the data sets from Faker.js. So Bogus has its own data sets in the data extend, but mostly it relies on Faker.js. So any improvements to Bogus or Faker.js, you get for free. So Faker.js has its own data sets. There's a little project in Bogus that combines them. So with a Node.js process or something, it grabs the Faker.js data sets, it combines them with data extent, and then puts them in a little BSON resource file, like a binary JSON. And that is the kind of the database that is then included in the Bogus DLL. And then all of these data sets we looked at are then yours for the taking. But there's one important thing to talk about as well. So most of us here are Dutch, I think. Yeah, I see a lot of nodding heads as well. So when you are generating data, who here then also thinks about Turkish names? Who adds Turkish names to their seed data? Very good. 2, 3 heads. Okay, let's have a look. Farsi? You're lying. No? Oh, okay, very good. My point is, no one raised their hand. Who here always uses Dutch things, like Dutch names? Yeah, more hands. Yeah, okay, yeah, you don't count. So, but my point is that developers don't really think internationally, right? It's a bigger problem as well. But with Bogus, this is really easy because we can generate there's data sets, but tons of language have different data sets. So there's also German names, German addresses, German domain names, or whatever. Not every data set is complete, and if it doesn't exist, it will fall back to English. But this really increases your options and also allows you to test international things. So let's also talk about region-specific data sets. So like in the Netherlands, we have BSN, right? Burger Service Number. That is not something that you would include in a basic data set because that's different for every country. So for example, in Brazil, I'm not going to try to pronounce this, they have the CPF. In Sweden, they have the personennummer. I'm so sorry, I had to do it. In Portugal, you have the NIF. And of course, in the United Kingdom, we have also like country-specific things. So we have the car license plate. So there's you can call this bit of code, and then it will generate a vehicle registration plate from Britain for you. The community also asks for Gaussian distributions, and there's for loads of countries, and way more than this, there's region-specific data sets available. Really, really interesting. Again, if you work in the government, you might really want to use, if there's a Dutch one, I'm not on top of my head sure, but then you could maybe use a BSN one to generate BSNs. Also, community NuGet extensions. So there's the Auto Bogus project, and this focuses on performance. It's a bit more performant than Bogus in some scenarios, but it's also able to generate types without you having to specify each property. So here we can say it generates a user, and then it will be 455 is active false, first name Idaho, last name Bluetooth, and email array, okay? But if you don't care, if this is fine for testing, well, then this is great, and it will be a bit more performant. Who here knows the Naughty Strings project? Ooh, cool, I can teach you something today. So the Naughty Strings project is quite big on GitHub. It's like a really big repository with tons and tons of different strings and bits of text with iOS vulnerabilities, SQL injection, server injection, all of these things. Using this in .NET is quite easy. There's a package for it, but there's then also the Bogus package for it. So now we can simply say, well, maybe for some testing things where we're generating some types, we can say, give me a naughty string with the SQL injection, and then it'll just give you a SQL injection string. Or some script injection, emoji, file inclusion, iOS vulnerabilities, loads of things. Really, really useful. So there's tons of extensions. So don't just think about generating names and addresses. You got to think very broad here. You can do a lot of things. So let's then learn a little bit about Anti-Framework Core. At the end of the presentation, we're doing a bit more of a demo of Bogus. I kind of want to talk about this as well now. Who here would like a refresher or an introduction on EF Core? I see one hand, and that's completely okay. We're going to do that. Thanks, John. Don't know if that's your name, but you're probably Swedish. All right, sorry, can't close this bottle. All right. Okay, so now that you know Bogus, let's talk about this. And again, Bogus is useful for generating data, but that needs to probably then go into your local database, maybe even on test, maybe even on prod if you want to. So I think most of us probably then use Anti-Framework Core. So a quick introduction. EF Core is a modern object database mapper for .NET. It supports link queries, change tracking, updates, schema migrations, etc. And it has support for loads of providers. Basically, C#, EF Core translates as a SQL, and then it does the SQL queries, and it gets the types and the data back from your database, and then it converts it back to C#. There's also the migration management, where you can then create new tables, columns, change types, change names, and EF Core can manage that for you with a migration. And this basically kind of creates an abstraction onto your database access. Quick example, let's create a blog called Sanders.net blog. We're also going to create a post called EF Core loves Bogus. We're going to we're going to add the blog to it. We're going to say blog.post.add post for some reason. We're going to say DB context, so this is EF Core's database context. And we're going to add the blog to it and call save changes. And this is basically now telling EF Core, please add this blog and the post to the database. So it will track the changes as well. So it knows that it needs to add both the blog and the post. And when that's done, we're telling the database context with a link query, go to the blogs table, include all the posts, so do a join, give me the results. So it'll give you the following: insert into blogs, then with the name parameter, and then the value that we just did, of Sanders.net blog, return the ID, post, create a new post, and then this query where it then returns the blogs. It also does a join on the posts, and then it then converts this to C#. Great stuff. And this is kind of, this is us. This is all of you, like you just said in the beginning. The pain of setting up data for a new system. The lorem ipsum, it's like one of the first things I learned as a student. And I loved it, but I hate it after doing this for 8 years, right? So, yeah, I already kind of proven on this point, we don't want to do these things by hand, because you can insert them, right, in the database by hand, but then you also have to think about the join tables and the foreign keys, and this is really not fun. So I did a little poll online, and just like you guys already did, like tons of people really still do this by hand, and that's where we're here to fix this. One more thing I want to add, actually, one more point that I kind of think, is that if you want to do a demo or you want to show your managers or some stakeholders something, like you're building a unique product in your eyes or in your stakeholders' eyes. So if you're just showing off lorem ipsum product 1, product 2, it might not really bring the point across of whatever you're trying to build and why your thing is unique, because we are doing really cool things. So that is why you want more realistic data, and there is there's a line somewhere. Doing everything by hand takes a lot of time, but will create really cool demos. Or just doing product 1, 2, 3. I think Bogus lies somewhere in the middle, a good middle. So in the EF Core, we can set up seed data. So when the tables and everything gets created, or when we apply database migrations, the default data is created. Try saying that 5 times. So here we can say default block 1, default block 2 for the block table. So now when we create this database, these 2 entities are created. And quite simple, we could now add some bogus code here that creates 100 blogs and sets that there, and then that's it. That's a very simple way of looking at it. But there is a bit of a problem with hash data that has kind of been fixed in EF Core 9. And this is really kind of hot off the press, right, since November. So I think it's important that you learn this. So there's a couple problems with hash data. There's concurrency issues. This has been fixed in EF Core 9. So if you're already on EF Core 9, this is not a problem for you anymore, except if you're using SQLite, then there's still some edge cases. But let's say that we're building an application, an API, and we're running 2 instances, or 3 or 4. So that you set up your application to migrate the database on app launch. If you do that, then you're going to probably get some database corruption at some point, where maybe seed data is added double, or there's going to be some weird issues when tables and foreign keys are created, etc. So you don't want that. There's also the problem that migrations are disconnected from the database. So when we create our migrations and we create our seed data with hash data, we have no idea what is in the database. We cannot query the database or use other services to do conditional seeding. And you also need to specify the primary key yourself, which is really annoying when you're doing domain-driven design, or your ID is a private set, because then you cannot set it. So you're going to have to use anonymous objects, and you lose your typing. So there's quite annoying to use hash data. And finally, large migrations can also cause bad performance. If you have tons and tons and tons of migrations with perhaps a lot of seed data, and you store that in the same assembly where your DB context and your data code lives, that assembly can kind of blow up in size, can cause some performance issues, and definitely can cause also some slow deployments and other issues. So that's why I want to talk to you about EF Core 9's newest feature called Use Seeding. Anyone already familiar with this? Great, great, awesome. I don't mind, because then I can tell you about it. So use seeding is a new method, or well, use seeding and use async seeding. Is this readable in the back, by the way? Yeah, awesome, great. So this is basically a method that you can then implement, and then it will call this code when you seed the code. And we're going to talk about when that happens in a little bit. One of the main differences here is that with has data, you just give it a list and say, make sure that this is in the database, where here you really need to do that yourself. So here we're actually checking, is there a test blog in the database? If not, add it. So here you need to manage that stuff yourself. And then there's use async seeding, and that's the same code, but then async. And this fixes the problems that we talked about before. Because here we have access to the context, but we can also get access to the service provider, so we can know what is in the database. We can do API calls and then do conditional seeding. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you can. And it's just, there's some more advantages to this. So when does this then run? Because has data migrations run when you call .NET EF database update and migration bundles. But I think a lot of people here, when they're applying entity framework core migrations, do you use like you generate like a SQL script that you apply in like CI/CD or something like that? No, not really. Let's talk about more about what you guys do later. But so when does this run? So this runs when you call ensure created. It runs when you call migrate. It runs when you call .NET EF database update and the migration bundles. I ran into some issues with this where it wasn't really clear to me. You shouldn't really do this for prod. You shouldn't really do this for prod. And you shouldn't really do that for prod. So I was like, so how do I do this on test or something like that? So migration bundles are kind of the way to go if you want to use this for non-local environments. So when you call these methods or the async versions, use seeding will run. And the main differences are that this is suitable for large data sets, because this will not really blow up your assembly all that much. But you must perform the equality checks yourself. And you can now also use the database and other things for seeding. Downsides, you should implement both use seeding and use async seeding. And that's a little bit weird, at least I think. So like we said before, right, there's use seeding and use async seeding. So what I'm telling you is that you need to write this exact code, but then with async. And the reason why is because when you call .NET EF database update, that's like the CLI tool, and that's that's synchronous code. So that will call use seeding. But when you call migrate async, ensure created async, that kind of stuff, that will use the async version. So it's a little bit annoying that you have to do that twice. Is that a question in the back that I hear?
Sorry?
Yeah.
I wasn't talking.
Oh, okay. No, that's okay. But what's your question?
No, I said
No.
use the same method, probably.
You could probably do that, but then you're gonna, from sync code, you're gonna call async code, and you're gonna have to use get await or get result, which you...
Not perfect, but at least not double.
I don't know, deadlocks and everything, but that's a discussion we can talk about later. I don't know. We can still agree on the fact that it's a bit of a downside, I think. Okay. Any questions about EF Core? Any question? Everyone's still following me. Everyone knows what we're doing here. If not, let me know. Let's talk about combining these two. All right. How am I doing on time? I'm actually doing really well on time. Are there any questions just in general so far? Okay. Let's continue.
I have one.
Yeah, actually, go on.
So when you put in the package, does it mean it fetches the data externally every time you generate, or is it local?
Right. So when you install the Bogus package, is the data included in the package, or is it like retrieved from somewhere?
Yeah.
So it's included in the package. But I think because it's stored in like a BSON, like binary JSON format, I haven't really looked at the size, but it is not a big package, I think. We can check in a bit, actually. Really good question. Meanwhile, we'll see that it's like 4 gigabytes, and then my entire talk falls apart. Yeah, go on.
How do you typically write unit tests in Bogus? Kind of
Like deterministically.
Yeah, do you do it deterministically? Yeah, that's a question I had.
Let's talk about that in the next slide. Oh. Really good question. It's as if we talked beforehand that you should ask this question.
Yeah, I've been paid like a tenner before.
Exactly. You'll get the money later. So let's combine EF Core with Bogus. Let's do it. So instead of setting up C data yourself, because that's boring and no one wants to do it, we're going to let Bogus generate it for us. And our goal here is to get realistic enough data for better testing and demos. We're not going to generate like Amazon. Amazon's a really bad example because those titles suck. Like, I don't know, Wekamp or webshop data with it, right? It's not going to generate exact human-looking data, but it's going to generate realistic-looking enough and better that we would do by hand. Luckily for us, this is very easy to set up. But now, we need to talk about, I worked really hard on that, the importance of determinism. So when our models change over time, the data that we generate per seeding run needs to remain the same. Thank you. So when we apply a migration to a database, so we say, here's my database with users, and I want my local database or my test database to always have these 20 users. Great. But now the second time we would run that code, it would be like, oh, I'm going to generate 20 users again, and it'll generate 20 different users. And that's going to pollute your database. You want this to be deterministic. We want random data, but always the same random data, all right? So a deterministic algorithm is an algorithm that blah, 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 blah. Same input, same output. And this is really important. Here, just a little bit of code for you. So let's create a faker class for the generic type product, a rule for the ID. Well, that's the product ID ++. The name needs to be from the commerce data set with the product name. Quantity needs to be between a random number 1 to 5. Let's generate 3 products. Bike, laptop, gloves. Quantity 1, 4, 3. Sure, let's run it again. Chair, check it. Fruit. That's not what we want. Because now our database, every time we deploy, so if you deploy multiple times per day, you're going to get 3 new products in your database. We want this to be the same. And luckily, this is possible. So there's 2 strategies. There's the global seed strategy, where we can simply say randomizer, that's the class from Bogus, .seed, and then you set up your random class instance. And now every time you run this code, the faker, and then generate 3 products, it will always generate the same 3 products, almost always. We'll talk about that in the next slide. So this is then used by all faker instances. So it's really simple to use. And then there's the local seed strategy. Spoiler, use this one. Don't use the top one. So the local seed strategy, you can say product faker, use seed, and then you give the number, and then generate, and then 3. So now, every time you call this, it will use this seed, but only for this time you call it. So you can also call product faker use seed, some other number that is not close to 1337. And this can support schema changes. So what do I then mean with schema changes? Our models evolve over time, right? So managers come to us and they tell us, well, we want products, and we want it to have a name and a quantity. But over time, you might want to add a description, you might want to add other properties, you might want to change some things. So what do we think happens? We're currently using the global seed. I told you to use the local seed, but this would still be the same problem if you use the local seed. We're telling it, okay, create an ID name quantity, but now we're also adding a description, right? So we're expecting bike 1 and then a description, laptop 4 description, gloves 3 description. But that's not what happens. We're getting bike 1 small, keyboard 2 refined, shirt 4 sleek. And that is quite weird because we didn't tell it to generate different data. The seed, there, still the same. So what is happening here? Anyone care to guess?
The rest is the random counter.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping for more interaction before someone guessed the right answer, but thank you very much. Exactly what's happening. Exactly. Okay, so what is happening is every time you call generate, it generates 1 item or 100 or whatever you specify, but there's the way that Bogus does deterministic things, and I'm dumbing it down a little bit, is it has the seed as input, but it also has an internal counter. So for example, the seed is 1338, the counter is 1, counter is 2, and then it thinks, 2 and 1338, and I need to generate a name. That'll always be bike. And then the counter is 3, and the quantity will be 1. But now we've added the description on the right, and this is the old scenario. So the counter will go to 4, and it'll be like, well, there's number 2, we also did that ourselves. And now there's something weird that's going to happen. Counter 5, 1338 is laptop. But on the right, we're not there yet. We added a description. So now it's going to be, counter 6 and 13 to the 8. Yeah, that'll always be keyboard. Right? So this is something that's happening, and you need to be careful of this. You need to fix this problem, because now counter 7, on the left we're done, but the quantity will be different. We might get a description, but we don't want the keyboard to have changed. Any questions about this? It's pretty important to understand if you're going to use this for more than just a fun little demo. Awesome. Okay. So how do we fix this? We basically want to give each item its own seed to prevent the underlying counter from shifting. So a little more animation here. Now we're telling it, instead of generating 3 products, we're calling generate 3 times, but with a unique seed. So the counter is 1, it's 2, bike, 3, 1, small, 4, new product, and the counter resets to 1. But now with a different seed. So now we're going to get laptop, we're going to get quantity 4, and we're going to get description sleek. Seed 3, counter reset, 3, and then we're going to get gloves, quantity 2, 3. What a shame. And then we're going to get handcrafted. So now the new columns do not affect the counters of other rows. So now we're basically, you just imagine, we're doing a for each loop. For each 1 to 10, and then every time you just generate 1 product with a unique seed of the index that we're looping over, and you get this behavior, and this is what you want. Because now we can add new rows, but this will not mess up the generation of other items.
What if you remove a column?
Do not change existing rules. So I'll get to that in a second. So you want to always add new rule 4 to the end. Because if we're adding the description here between name and quantity, the counter messes up again. Because then the counter we're going to have a different value again. Or the same thing if you want to change or delete rules. So if you delete a rule, the same thing applies. The counter will change. But also changing rules. Like if we're now saying, I don't want the bike to be a product name anymore, but like a first name, makes sense, but then the data is going to change. You also want to always use the local seed strategy, because the global one does not support this, unless for every product you call, you want to change the global version, but then you're going to get race conditions. I'll get to you in a second. And then also you want to utilize Bogus's random APIs. So we saw where we picked a random number between 1 and 5. We were not doing that with like the random class from C#. We were using Bogus's version for that, because that ties into this whole story. And now I can get to your question.
You can't override the fact that it's using a counter. You just, like, let's say you want to use the column name instead as part of the seed.
Say that one again, one more time, please.
Let's say instead of using a counter that like increments per column that you generate, you use the column name instead as well.
Column name. It's like you make it a very unique. Oh, that's really smart. Right. So what you're saying is instead of using the seed as the number, we're generating the name based on this property here.
Per cell, you take the
Oh, that's actually pretty clever.
Row number plus column name. Yeah.
Well, this is like a community programming project. That's really clever. I'm going to update my slides about that one. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to test that out, but I think that it'll probably, performance-wise, might be a little bit more, But yeah, I think that might be a worthy trade-off, depending on what you want, for fixing that problem. Thank you. That's really, really, really good. Yes?
Where would you use the seed call? Is it at the same place at the local one that you showed?
Yeah, in the next slide, I'm going to show off that exactly. Okay. Any questions or any really other good ideas? Because that was really good. It wasn't from the same Swedish guy, right? No, just... Oh, okay, right, yeah. Really smart people there. Okay, so let's take a look at some code as well. So we're creating a faker with a name. It needs to be a product name. Description needs to be the commerce data set product description. And then now we're not telling it generate 5 products, but we're saying generate 1 product 5 times with a unique seed. Right? So each product will have the current index as its seed. So we're having a function here, seed row, and we're telling it faker, use this seed, so the row ID. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then generate a single product. And this is then going to apply the theory of what I just showed you. Does that answer your question as well? Yeah. Awesome. I'm actually doing really good on time. That's really surprising. I'm so happy about that. Okay, let's do a little demo. Let me have a look and switch to my thing. All right, awesome. We doing good, everyone? Everyone still enjoying themselves? Yeah? Awesome. Very good to hear it. Even a little woo there. Okay. Let me know. Yeah, I see you. This is way too small for you, isn't it? Do I need to increase the font size a little bit? I'll increase the fonts. Let me have a look. There we go. Is this okay for everyone in the back? Yeah? Okay, awesome. So in this little demo, this repo is really big. I have loads of different demos, like with lots of different code. One of them, actually, let me start with that. We talked about unit tests. And because I have time left over, I can sell out. So I have a little project here, like a little unit test that can, create a fake user and then uses it in a unit test. But this is using T-unit, which is like an alternative to X-unit and N-unit, and it's way faster, and it uses the new Microsoft testing platform. And this is like way faster because it uses source generators. That was the previous talk. That was maybe about source generators too. If you're like, wow, that sounds really interesting, you should read this magazine because I wrote an article in it. Thank you. I also wrote a blog post about it on my website. But T-unit is really, really interesting, especially because it uses this new Microsoft testing platform. Anyway, you're not here to learn about that. Let's talk about the real demo. Okay, so in this demo, we're going to use products and categories, store them in a SQL Server database running in Docker. Let me have a look. We're having 8 minutes. That's awesome. Okay, so well, actually, let me step one step back. We have an ID, a name, creation date. A product can have many categories. So there's this linking table. And then there's the product category with an ID and the name. So a product has a name, a date, and categories. Riveting stuff. Now we're setting up EF Core. So we have a product context with products, product categories, product categories like the linking table. We're telling the product you have a unique name. The category has a unique name as well. Composite key. Doesn't really matter all that much. But now we're going to the code. So we're going to have a little bit of an application here. When it starts, it's a console app. It will retrieve all the products and the categories from the database, and it's going to use the Spectre console library. If you haven't heard of it, it's really cool. I'll show you in a second what it produces. And this will then show us all the products. And of course, we currently have an empty database. So I'm going to show you what this does. Let me increase this .NET Run. There we go. So this is a little application, or let me see, there we go. So this is, we can see here the query that it's executing to defaulting, and now you can see Spectre console. It's really easy to make like a really nice little, console table and some nice ASCII art, etc. Okay. So we want to fill this, but we don't want to do this by hand. I'm not going to demonstrate it. It's boring. We don't have the time. But you can imagine that I would now open SQL Server Management Studio or whatever, and then add the products by hand, or use a for loop and whatever. So we don't want to do that. So I created a little class here, database seeder, and this is going to produce all these things with Bogus that we can then insert into the database. So we have products, we have product categories and the join table. And now we can say, generate 100 products, generate 22 categories, and then generate 200 link tables, entities between them. Okay, how does that look? What does that look like? So we have a faker for a product. We have we tell it the rule for the name needs to be a product name. The rule for the creation date needs to be maybe a date in the future. I don't know, doesn't make much sense, but it works. With a reference date, again, determinism. If we're telling it to generate a date in the future, it will not be deterministic, because if you run this tomorrow, you might get different, you're not going to get today anymore or in an hour anymore, because that has passed. So we're passing in a ref date, a reference date, to base that on, and then it will act deterministically. Documentation is also really good on this. So we set up the faker, and now we're telling it, create an array filled with entities from 1 to 100, I think I said, and then seed row. So now we're going to generate 100 products one at a time. Faker, use that seed, like you already said. We could definitely make this like the row, like the property name and the seed, and then generate it and then return it. And this will then store this in this list of products. And we're doing the same thing for the categories. And now we're using, oh, there we go, here. So now this is kind of the fun part, again, with Bogus's APIs. We have generated products, we have generated categories, but we still need to put them together. So we're telling it, please generate, I think I said 200 of these join table entities. So for the product, pick a random product, and we pass in the products that we generated. For the category, pick a random category. And here we're just deduplicating the list. Yeah?
How do you make sure the product name is unique? Is that possible?
I was hoping I wouldn't get that question. You know how I do that? By just generating 100 products instead of too many, because I couldn't be bothered to think about that.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, so I said, here, Bogus doesn't have a big enough data set to guarantee unique names for like a giant data set. I guess what you could do is, do English, German, all these then it will probably be really big. But for now, I just limit myself to 100. But still, it's a good question. It's a shame you had to ask it, though. Okay, so then we need to, awesome, but let's actually run this. So in our program CS, we are adding our database context for Entity Framework. We're using SQL Server in Docker, and now we're calling use seeding. So what I'm doing is I'm creating this new database seeder class. I'm storing some sets just in memory for now, just it's easier to use. And now we're saying, well, for every product that it is generated, take a look if it is already in the database, and if not, add it to the DB set. I see someone taking pictures, completely fine. This demo will also, you'll have a link to the demo in a bit if you want to have it. Same thing, does anyone would like to have the slides? If you do, maybe just send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll send you the slides later. Same thing for the product categories, we're adding the categories. Same thing for the other thing, like the link table. And now we're telling it save changes, and now when we're migrating or applying seeding data, it will store this in the database. Same thing with async seeding. So async seeding is the exact same code, but here we're using like a sync await. And there's multiple ways to then apply this to your project. For now, I'm just going to choose to go ahead with .NET EF database update. And this is running all locally, so it should work. Yes. And this has now created all the testing data. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And we have some amazing products to sell. We got a gorgeous wooden shoes. That's actually still really, really good. Category toys works. A tasty plastic keyboard. A generic but soft tuna in the categories books, clothing, and sports. A rustic metal fish, something I would see someone hanging on a wall, honestly. Let's say? This is what I meant. Like if you go to like AliExpress or Amazon these days, it's just like doll for kids, doll, that kind of stuff. They might actually use Bogus. Which one? 209, practical granite car. That's a Cybertruck. An awesome concrete ball. Please don't. Anyway. You see what I mean with saying fun? Like this is, you don't want to show this off to like, I don't know, Jeff Bezos or something in a meeting. But it is much more fun than product 1 to product 99 or Lorem Ipsum or whatever. This is fun. And this is, of course, just one data set. Like the person data set will look a lot more serious because they're actual names. Yeah?
Can you create your own data set?
You can definitely create your own data set. Yeah, in the documentation, there's some information about that. Great question. I have 40 seconds left. Yeah. Because it chose to not give that a category. Well, we told it to pick a random amount of, we told it to generate, to take all the products and then generate categories and link entities. It was just decided to not do that for this one. That's the randomness here. It is intended. We're giving products categories, but it does that 200 times, and it has skipped over that one just by random chance and the seed that we used. In this case, a category is not required. But if it would be, then I would need to change this code. Great question. OK, we're running out of time. So I'm going to quickly go through this. let me switch here. And look at me thinking I'm saying, oh, we have all the time available. It just doesn't want to work anymore. Please. Please do it. Come on. Okay, good. Adding Bogus to your .NET project can lead to massive improvements. It's useful for testing, data seeding, ensuring privacy regulations, and just way more. Combining it with Entity Framework Core, it's easy to set up data seeding for a project. This leads to less time rating fake data, more time developing awesome projects, and gorgeous wooden shoes. Okay, so I wrote a blog post about all of this. Every talk I give, I write a blog post. If you want to share this with your colleagues, with your friends or whatever, check that QR code. Some links if you want to take a quick picture. I see some people taking a phone. I'll wait a few more seconds. All right. I apologize for being over time. Not very nice. I don't want to do that usually. Please leave a good review. But thank you so much for attending my session. I don't have time, but if you have any more questions, I'll do that outside. Again, it has been so much fun to speak here today. I hope you had a great time. And yeah, hopefully see you again next time.